This is 1939. Laura Andreasen. She has been at UCLA for about 6 years teaching. She prides herself on having taught over 5,000 students. When she opened the department or built the department, they had nothing. A couple of sinks and maybe $100 a year for equipment. When she retired, she had many kilns, many students, and today I believe the ceramics department at UCLA has about 5 students again. It's gone all the way up, and it has a completely different focus. It shows you what one person can do. It's not the only way to do it, but that was her way of doing it. This is uranium glaze. It has an unglazed foot, not unlike what Glenn Lukens at USC popularized. It's just an interesting piece. You have to tell me what you want me to talk about.
Mary Rank, definitely.
Mary Rank was a jeweler. Studied at the new Bauhaus in Chicago. She's known for her jewelry. This little bear pin is typical in a way of her work. It's on modules, 2 rings that are not soldered together. A friend went to her studio, came home and said, "She has a vessel." Oh, I trotted over to see, and this is the vessel I bought. Bob Stocksdale made the wooden base for me. Mary said, "I will polish it for you when you finish paying for it." And so maybe a month or so later, I went back. She said, "I worked harder polishing the damn brass. Then it took more effort to polish the brass than to make the piece." This little pin of stones and silver is by Margaret DePata, a very, very important jewelry maker in mid-20th century. The Oakland Museum, in connection with a museum back east, had a show of her work 15 years ago. A very forward-thinking jeweler. She had 2 lines, these unique pieces, and there's a poster of around 40 production pieces that she made in multiple examples of. Okay, here's my gray Nassler bow, the gray Nassler bow I was talking about, and I want you,
Right here?
yeah, I want each of you to put your nose in there and see the melt fissure lines. What happens is in the reduction firing, the glaze floats and creates separations which are totally uncontrolled by the artist during the firing. Laura Andreasen again here. She did a lot of experiments in glaze formulations while she was at UCLA. Her friends, Al and Louisa King from Watts, they were also very seminally involved with glazes of an oriental nature, and that's the example that I have of their work. This is a sulfur glazed Nassler. When you finish looking at the melt fissures, come over here and look at this, and you will see it's the same. It is art imitating nature, because if you've ever walked in the woods and come upon lichens, if you look in there, you will see lichens, only these aren't growing. They're part of the glaze. It's a wonderful experience to be able to see these things close up and to know just a little bit about the process. I am interested in examples that show process, but I don't make anything, so I don't focus a lot of energy on how something is made. I'm interested in the product. Okay, where are we going to go next? This is made by Peter Voulkos, and it's an early piece. It was made by Peter Voulkos when he was the lab assistant in the Pacific Northwest for my friend Rex Mason, who made the covered jar with the figures at the bottom there. That was made in San Francisco. Rex then went moved to New Mexico, to Santa Fe, and I had met him in the 60s in San Francisco. And this sat in his dining room in a window. It had a big black cat, and the cat would sleep in the afternoon in the Voulkos because it would be warm and comfortable for the cat. I'm very, very fond of this piece. It's wax resist. This is a face pot by Margaret Wilden. It has two faces, one on either side. She liked to go to Guatemala, to Lake Atalan, and make drawings and come home and use those drawings as an inspiration for decorating her pots. She never drew like this, looking at you. She would look at you, she would go home and make the drawing. She said, you have to look in order to see. The corollary of that is you have to listen in order to hear. Carlton Ball made this piece here. He taught at Mills College. He was one of the first developers of the kick wheel. Laura Andreasen sent students up to him to learn about the kick wheel. This is a wax resist. This is Royal Cornell, a Southern California potter, important in the 40s. I really don't know too much about him. He is someone I did not meet. Tom McMillan has taught for many years at a regional college at the coast just south of Ventura. And he got into making these sand constructions at the beach. And then the waves would come in and he would photograph the process. I like the pots much better. Henry Takemoto was a student of Peter Voulkos. He's richly shown in the current Scripps annual show in Claremont this winter. This winter. And I visited him once, and he said, you know, we really didn't know what we were doing. We were just doing. We were just doing it. And to my way of thinking, this is a very happy accident that has a current life because he just put a number of things together. Hal Rieger is from Northern California. He competed with Paul Solner and discussed back and forth who really introduced, oh my, what is the word? A certain kind of raku firing. And I think he had a little bit of sour grapes because Solner had a college teaching position and became well known, and Hal, when I visited him in his home in Gridley, Northern California, he had 2 boxcars where he had created a large diorama with little trains that he had made that went chug, 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 chug. And so, you know, you can be creative in lots of different ways. Winning teamed up with Spalding Taylor to create a store in San Francisco called Taylor & Ing. This is a very modest piece of Winning's work, but in a way it has some of the same idea. Mary Lindhome is someone who is not well known. I first saw her work on the peninsula at a museum, and I went to Otto Hanos and I said, you know, I've seen some work by this potter, Mary Lindhome. What can you tell me? He said, well, first of all, you don't call her a potter. She is a sculptor. And I did meet her once, shortly before her death. And then a good friend of mine in Mill Valley was assigned to assist her estate in creating a show, publishing a book, and then disseminating things to different museums. And I wanted this very atypical piece of hers because this was fired at the beach in Raku, not unlike Hal Rigger. The reason I'm keen on Mary Lindhome is, have many of you driven from San Francisco to Sausalito? Yes. And you come over the bridge and you come wiggling down the hill and then you drive along the bay to get to town, and the hill is here. Mary Lindhome was one of the few people who formed a committee to make sure that the waterfront that you enjoy when you come down the hill and drive along the bay was not built upon for housing and boathouses. You really enjoy, because that one or two people got the idea that had to be open for everyone. It's a very nice heritage to give to all of us. J.B. Blunk is an artist who lived in Marin, near Point Reyes. And he became well known as a wood sculptor. He did early on some ceramics, and that's an example of the kind of ceramics that's very dated to the mid-20th century. This is a covered bowl by Herbert Sanders, the first American person to get a PhD in ceramics. He taught for many years at San Jose State College, and he became very interested in crystalline glazes. He did all his work at the university. His colleague, James Lavera, who has a bowl, there's a bowl, black and white bowl of his in the other room, taught there as well, and he did all of his work at home. He did his teaching at the college, and this man made his pots at the college in addition to teaching. It's an interesting juxtaposition of philosophies. This is made by Elena Netherby. Her husband had been a contractor, and she formed the Mills Ceramic Guild and became fascinated with these copper glazed possibilities there. That's a very large one for her. Usually the bottles were very small. One of the real loves of my life is June Schwarz, an enamelist, died several years ago in her 90s. This piece doesn't give great justice to her skills as an enamelist, but the Palo Alto Art Center came to me, the curator came and said, we're doing an enamel show. Oh, this gets back to purchasing. And they said, we want about 20 June Schwarz to have a mini exhibit within our enamel show. And so I got these vessels out. And they took all the ones that have noticeable enameling on the outside. And away they went, and I looked, and I thought, that metalwork is really very interesting. And so I started focusing my acquisitions on the unpopular ones that really intrigued me. And it's where you do one thing and a new window opens up and you see it with new eyes. It's a lot of fun to grow and learn about yourself and your capacity to absorb new information. These two pieces are made by an ironmonger, although one is brass and one is copper. Carl Jennings, who lived in Sonoma, and this sat in the middle of a very big copper surround for a fireplace. Otto Haino, the Hainos lived in Ojai for many years. I am providing the material for a Haino show in New Hampshire later this year. And I like this one particularly because a little while ago I mentioned the ceramic work of Toshiko Takaezu. And when she got very old, almost as old as I am now, she decided that she would give some of her pieces to any museum that already had one of her pieces. An interesting idea of how to share. And she gave a number of pieces to the Crocker Art Museum. And every time I go, they're on display down by the restaurant in the museum. There's one piece, these are just big forms, closed bottles, not with a flare at the top. She had one and she just took the slip and went like that. And you can still feel the energy she must have felt when she did that. And I had, this came from Bonham's last year. And I got the same feeling about this because Vivica told me that Otto dripped better than she did. But this isn't dripped. This is actually painted on there. And I get very excited when I see that because there's energy there. There's really energy there. Now maybe some of you here, maybe if there's just one person who knows about this artist, I want to know more about Songbird. He apparently has a widow in the area somewhere. I have to do my research. It's a wonderful, for me, it is a wonderful abstraction of plant forms. That's all I can say. Harrison McIntosh's widow and her daughter and son-in-law were here today, and I thought, I really have to show this to Marguerite because to me it is one of the most wonderful, special little pots here. It's very early. It's very good. There's economy of material. There's nothing extra there. It's a pleasure to hold. It's really a pleasure to hold. This is made by Rick Peterson, a potter at Scripps and instrumental in developing the art programs in Claremont. And if you go to Claremont, there is a wonderful little museum in a Episcopalian, or some religious, it isn't Episcopalian, but it's some non-Catholic retirement home. And their home, when they died, they made that into a museum. And I believe it's open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you need to probably phone ahead, but it's a wonderful treasure of early ceramic pieces and other artists in the Claremont area. The little mountain goat is made by Betty Davenport Ford, who worked with Sam Malouf at the Denzel Hatfield Gallery and the Ambassador Hotel. And a few years ago, the Getty had the Pacific Standard Time program in the front of the American Museum of Ceramic Art, the book they did for that show. There's a picture of her with an example that's this high of that same animal. A lot of fun to see. This was made by Stan Dan and is important to me because I was able to get a piece of his work in a show at Mad Museum 10 years ago. And more or less unknown artist in the Bay Area. There was a famous pit stop between San Francisco and Sacramento called the Nut Tree. And he did a lot of the original signing, carved signing for the Nut Tree. He also did signage for one of the reincarnations of the Stanford Shopping Center in the 60s. So now we're back to Kay and Bob. When Kay studied with Jack Larson, she was his assistant, and she created soon thereafter this eyelash panel. And he was so taken with it that he made this interpretation for commercial purposes. But he came to feel he couldn't afford to have someone come and clip all these little threads. So no production made of it. No production was made of it, but that shows you it's a real Bauhaus tradition of artists developing a prototype that could have been mass-produced. This is a wooden bowl by Bob Stockstill, Kay's deceased husband. And so I hope that gives you some idea. Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.